This is the brand new ZV-1F, the latest pocket vlogging camera from Sony, and they're finally giving it to us. A proper ultra-wide angle prime lens that can fit our entire face at arm's length. I have seriously lost track of how long it's been that we requested for something like this, but it's finally here. It's light, it's available in white, and it weighs less than a can of Sprite. So let's go ahead and break it all down in another fine episode of the Vong Opinion. So if you're brand new to the Sony ZV series, these are a dedicated line of cameras simplified for content creators. You don't have to have a background in photography or videography to achieve the results that you want. For example, there's a dedicated button at the top called background defocus, and that will automatically blur the background for you. And this is an f2 lens, so it will provide ample amount of blur so the focus is more on you. No photography pun intended. There's also a dedicated button called Product Showcase that turns off face and eye detection autofocus easily. No more of that awkward covering your face while showing off your latest haul. And this also has a very smart auto exposure that prioritizes lighting on your face as you quickly go through super bright to super dark areas and vice versa. And there's a decent onboard mic here at the top, so you don't have to invest in an external mic if you don't want to and preserve all of its cute tiny little form factor right here. So longtime pocket camera users are really going to appreciate this. The full frame field of view equivalent of this lens on the new ZV-1F is a 20mm. Plenty wide to keep your entire face in frame, even if you enable active stabilization. Now, prior to this, we were coming from a long line of RX100 series cameras up to the ZV-1, and all started at 24mm, which for years we have complained that it is not wide enough. What's worse is if you enable active stabilization on those cameras and it comes in with an extra 10% crop, so it's even closer. For the last 2 years, a lot of ZV-1 users picked up this wide-angle lens attachment from Ulanzi, which wind up the framing up to 18mm according to their product description. It's awesome, but it also makes the entire setup very front heavy. However, it was worth it for a lot of users. So I went ahead and compared all of the different field of views. Here's a side-by-side of the 20mm versus 24mm on the ZV-1 with no wide-angle lens attachment and active stabilization turned off. As you can see, the 24mm already fuse pretty tight. And when you turn on active stabilization on both, it's just way too close on the face on the old ZV-1. The new 20mm on the new ZV is definitely much better. Now here's a side-by-side of the new 20mm versus the ZV-1 with the wide-angle lens attachment. No active stabilization turned on, and it seems like the 20mm ends up looking a bit wider. And that's still the case when you enable active stabilization on both. Now, we did something interesting. If Ulanzi manufactures a ring that can attach to the new ZV-1F, we can achieve an even wider view. Our example shot here isn't so great because we're just hand-holding it, but this is just a glimpse of the possibility. Now just to clarify, the lens on the new ZV-1F is a prime lens versus the optical zoom lens the ZV-1 has. So that would be the trade-off between the two cameras. As ingenious as the 24-70 zoom lens is on the ZV-1, I think some people would care more about having a wider lens than a longer reach. But not me though, I am still loving my crazy zoom on the RX100 Mark 7, 24 to 200mm, baby. Please, 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 Sony, please do not give up on the RX100. Please give us a Mark 8 with 4K 60p, please, please, please. But you can still use the clear image zoom and digital zoom on the new ZV-1F. Clear image zoom has a shorter reach, but it retains as much quality as possible, whereas digital zoom just takes your frame and just stretches in. If you select digital zoom, it will use clear image zoom up until a certain point, as denoted by the C, and then the digital zoom will kick in. The aperture on this goes from f2 to f8, and f2 is more than enough to provide a nice background blur and still comes in clutch during low light scenes. Now, this isn't something that I personally use, but the same low, medium, and high skin softening settings exist on this camera if you need it. And just really quickly, there is webcam and streaming functionality via USB-C, which you can also use to charge your camera as well. Alright, so let's talk autofocus. What's surprising with the new ZV-1F is that it's contrast-based detection autofocus only, no phase detection. Now, not to be confused with face detection, because this camera can still detect face and eye, and surprisingly, supports touch tracking autofocus. Now, most modern Sony cameras have hybrid autofocus that utilizes both face and contrast for nailing focus quickly and accurately. And I honestly thought that the contrast-only detection would hinder this camera, but actually, the autofocus works surprisingly well, and it grabs focus on my face fairly quickly. And in this test, it may seem like it's performing faster than the ZV-1, but the ZV-1 has options where you can change the speed and sensitivity of the focus, and we had it on normal and standard here. So the reaction time is a bit on the slower side. The new ZV-1F is probably tuned a bit higher on the sensitivity, but there's no way for users to control it. As I walk backwards, it's easier to see that the ZV-1 does a much better job at keeping me in focus. Either way, the new ZV-1F works great and the focus pull is smooth. And this isn't a camera you would use for tracking fast-moving subject anyway, but just something to keep in mind if you're at a toss between two cameras. A new function that's been added is S&Q, which stands for slow and quick, which is a much better way to do slow motion and time lapses on Sony cameras. The ZV-1 does not have this, but it does have high frame rate mode. Now the ZV-1 can do up to 960 frames per second, but only at 720p for a few seconds only. It can also do 240 frames per second at 1080p, but again, only for a few seconds only. But there is no time limit with S&Q. You can get up to a solid 1080p 120 and it plays it back right away. Now just a friendly reminder, S&Q does not record audio, so make doubly sure you're in the right mode before you hit record. Thank goodness we do not have to go through another round of old Sony menu UI. This new menu UI has been implemented in their flagships for the last couple years, so we're finally seeing it get trickled down to these little guys right here. It's so much better, it's so much cleaner, it's so much more organized, and it supports touch navigation. And what's new and currently exclusive to the ZV-1F is the on-screen settings running vertically on both sides of the screen. Kinda reminds me of what Canon has on some of their cameras. But more touchscreen usage is a good thing if that's something that you're more used to. You can change the color profile, enable product showcase, set a countdown timer for video, which is new by the way, toggle zoom, record, and even playback. Or you can also hide it entirely. And swiping up brings up your standard set of quick function menu items. However, if you're used to the physical buttons, then you might find the on-screen ones a bit redundant, and I couldn't find a way to customize the on-screen items. So if you like to customize things, you can still do it with the physical buttons. Now when we hit record, the on-screen playback transforms into an S1 button, and we can use it to set scene markers during recording. And this will help us later in editing to find a specific section of the video through a dedicated Sony app. And don't worry, you can also set these scene markers during playback. Now these scene markers can then be used to cut out 15, 30, or 60 seconds of the video, center around each marker, and transfer to a smartphone. Sony will be releasing a new app called Imaging Edge Mobile Plus that will support this, but at the time of making this video, it's not out yet. However, this metadata, as far as I know, will likely not appear in your typical editing software like Final Cut Pro 10, Premiere, or Resolve. So speaking of playback, we haven't gotten a chance to talk about audio yet. Like the ZV-1, there's a 3.5mm mic jack for shotgun mics or loft mics to get better audio, but like the rest of the ZV line, it has a better onboard mic than your typical camera would. Still comes with this funny mic toupee, and it's actually a lot more wavier and flowier compared to the previous fuzzball. However, I did notice the mic grill is different than from the ZV-1, and the audio quality, both at their default 26 decibel, the new ZV is audibly more tingier, whereas the ZV-1 sounds more controlled. While it's fine, I would say the ZV-1 is a bit better. Okay, so this is gonna be an audio test with the new ZV. There's a helicopter that's flying over that way, so it's not gonna be a fair test for the ZV-1 later, but there's a little bit of a gentle breeze that's going on. I'm blocking the window right now, so hopefully it helps. All right, so this is a test with the ZV-1, just so we have a comparison between the new ZV and this one right here. Not a lot of cars going by, but this is with the same audio settings, I believe, at 26. There's that gentle breeze that's going by right now, and we have a car that's going to both directions. So you hear one car that's going by right now. But then I went ahead and did another test with the new ZV, knocked it down by a few decibels to about 21, and it sounds a lot better. Okay, so this is an audio test again with the brand new ZV. This time I dropped it by 5 decibels, so it's at 21 instead of 26. Let's see if it still sounds tingy. Oh, there's a car coming, so I'm gonna keep talking while the car is going by, and we'll see how that sounds. Now we covered a lot of important stuff already, and there's still a few more detailed things, but I do want to get some of these other ones out of the way first because it is important to some potential buyers. And we'll start off with odd quirks first. Number 1, it can take photos, but you can't shoot RAW, JPEGs only. Number 2, there's no autofocus continuous in photo mode. There's touch tracking autofocus and it will recognize faces and eyes, but the moment you have pressed the shutter, it will lock focus on that spot. Number 3, no electronic contacts on the hot shoe, so no usage of flash or any of Sony's accessories that utilizes the multi-interface hot shoe like some of their newer mics. But remember, you can still plug in via the 3.5mm mic jack. Number 4, no built-in ND filter. Number 5, it comes with a lens cap, which I can foresee a bunch of you losing. Next up, let's talk about positive quirks. Number 1, lens cap means filters, so you can attach your own lens filters to it like NDs. Number 2, the 1/4" 20 screw hole is not next to the battery door. I repeat, it's not next to the battery door, meaning you can mount quick release plates or tripods without blocking access to your battery and SD card. OMG, this is really a BFD. Number 3, yes, it can record in S-Log and hybrid log gamma for you hardcore colorists out there, but even though the display says 8-bit, there's actually not another option that you can choose from, so no 10-bit option. And while we're at it, it does not have Cinetone. I know, bummer, right? This is supposed to be positive quirks. What are we doing? Let's move on. Number 4, we now have the latest set of creative color profiles, which you can make a lot more adjustments to. And number 5, an accessibility feature called Screen Reader, which reads out your menu settings for you.
Screen Reader on, speed, standard.
And finally, number 6, it will record gyro metadata so you can use Sony's Catalyst Browse if you want better post-stabilization. Alright, moving on to battery runtime and is there overheating? Now, a couple of things to bear in mind here. I am using a Sony branded battery, a fast SD card, and auto power temperature setting set to high. And this is something that you want to make sure to change when you get any Sony cameras. At 4K 30 frames per second, it was able to record up to 1 hour and 17 minutes with no heating issues. Now halfway through the test, the camera was normal, gentle warm, but never too hot to touch. At 1080p 30, it lasted an extra 30 minutes. Oh, and I forgot to include, you can make your monitor brighter to sunny weather when shooting 1080p only, not 4K. And finally, price. $500 US, and it will be available before the end of October. And I honestly think this is a solid option. It's $250 less than the current ZV-1, but more stripped down to the essentials. You still have the ease of use, but a wider lens only, contrast detect only autofocus that still works great, and it's incredibly light. In some instances too, certain features are considered upgrades over the ZV-1, such as the new menu system, a fully touch navigated display, countdown video timer, and a new selection of color profiles. But if you still want an optical zoom lens, stick to the ZV-1. In fact, it's likely that we'll see an update to that camera with some of the improved features we are seeing in the new 1F, whether it's called the ZV-2 or the ZV-1 Mark II. So if you can afford to wait, I would say hold out until next year, but again, the ZV-1F is a solid budget option right now. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to create beautiful websites. No coding knowledge whatsoever. Perfect for people like me because I just want to make YouTube videos for you guys and not have to worry about coding my entire website. Simply just select one of their templates to get started. Every aspect is easily customizable with their drag and drop feature. Whether you're in need of a portfolio, an e-commerce store, or even a simple blog, design it with Squarespace. Use my link down below to test it out, and when you're ready to launch your first website or domain, use my code JasonVong to save 10% off. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!